Xenomorphs and Tyranids, two alpha predators and two of the most terrifying creatures in sci-fi. If these two faced off against each other, who would win? In this video, I'll go over several of the various forms of Xenomorphs and Tyranids that we're going to be pairing up against each other, see who would win a 1v1, and then talk about what an invasion or outbreak of each of these creatures would look like. Let's start with the Xenomorph. Simply meaning strange form, the Xenomorphs are the main threat in the Alien franchise. A standard Xenomorph will stand around 7 feet tall, be far more agile than a human, be largely resistant to small arms fire, be able to survive in the vacuum of space, as well as having highly acidic blood. Because it's such a quickly reproducing and evolving species, there are several different variations of them. For the sake of the video, we'll be talking about the two seen in the Alien movies most frequently, which are the Warriors and the Queen. The Warrior Xenomorph, also referred to as a soldier, is the adult form of a Xeno. These are what you see in the first Alien movie. They're fairly intelligent and will act as an ambush animal in small numbers. They'll move through air ducts and pick off targets one at a time, but a group of them will swarm the target with overwhelming numbers and force. This is why the behavior is so different in Aliens compared to the first movie. The other form we'll be talking about is the Queen. Queen is a 20-foot tall Xeno, and is probably the strongest and most intelligent Xenomorph we see in the main movies. The Queen has a telepathic connection to other Xenomorphs and will act like a hive mind. She can also lay eggs, which will spawn facehuggers. The Xenomorphs are quite a bit more physically capable than a human. We know they're fast, although there's nothing to really give us a top speed. I'll have some clips of them jumping and sprinting from the movies to give you an idea of what their agility looks like. The Xenomorphs are also a highly survivable species. Although it's not entirely consistent exactly how much firepower it takes to take down a Xenomorph, there are plenty of examples of pistols and even rifle fire not working on them. Besides the Alien vs. Predator movies, we really don't see many close-up attacks being used on them. One of the only times we really see this is when Ripley fights a Queen with a power loader, and this loader can move around 9,000 pounds. While Ripley won this, the Queen was able to basically hold its own against the power loader, meaning it wasn't too far under the strength of a loader. Queens are a lot bigger and stronger than a normal drone or warrior, but it's a good display of what the species is capable of. All Xenomorphs are resistant to the vacuum of space. They can fight in this environment with no ill effects and have been shown to navigate and move around outside of a spaceship. They're also immune to extremely low temperatures. They're highly resistant to radiation, and they can survive without air and have been shown to be able to survive under the water as well. On offense, they are extremely dangerous. One of the most iconic weapons at their disposal is their inner jaw. The inner jaw can punch through body armor, colonial marine ballistic helmets, metal, and if you want to count the AVP movie, it could punch through the Predator's helmet as well. Another iconic attack in the Xenomorph is the acidic blood. This sprays out when they're hit and can even be sprayed from the mouth by some Xenos. The fluid is highly acidic and can burn through multiple layers of a ship before stopping. We've seen Xenos get killed within acid spray range of other Xenos, and it doesn't appear like the acid blood hurts each other, which means they are likely immune to their own acid. The final weapon of the Xeno is the claw, heads, and tails. The heads are tough enough to break through glass that's meant to withstand extreme climates of not yet terraformed worlds, as well as bust through metal. Their claws can tear a person apart, and their tails can impale almost anything. It's shown that military-grade armor isn't enough to stop a Xenomorph tail. I'm not going to go into a lot of scaling for the Queen, because we don't see Queens that often. There aren't a lot of feats here to draw from, so we basically have to assume that you take a normal Xenomorph and just scale it up in size and strength accordingly. Now let's talk about what a Xenomorph invasion of a world would look like. From seeing the Xenomorph biology and what happened to Hadley's Hope, we have a pretty good idea of what a Xenomorph takeover of a planet is like. Xenomorphs are not space-traveling organisms, so somehow a facehugger, an egg, or one of these subspecies that can create another Queen has to get onto the planet. Once this happens, a royal facehugger, which is a facehugger that can birth a Queen, will be born and start mass-producing eggs. And then other Xenos will start collecting people to use with the facehuggers to simply make more Xenos. It's one of those situations where for every person that falls, you end up with another Xenomorph. This would get out of hand quickly, and once there are enough of them, you can't really do anything to stop it, besides extreme bombing of the area, making sure to kill every possible living thing, including civilians. This likely wouldn't even be effective, because if only a couple people survive, or somebody with a chest burster gets away from the area, all you did was slow down the problem. Xenomorphs are truly one of the most terrifying creatures in sci-fi, and are absolutely one of my favorites. Now let's talk about Tyranids. Tyranids are one of, if not the largest threat in the Warhammer 40,000 universe. They're an alien species with unknown origins. There's not a lot known about them because basically when they invade a planet, no one survives. This means that all the stories about them are the secondhand stories from the couple survivors. Tyranids exist to consume the biomass of worlds, and then they use that biomass to grow and evolve. They have an insane amount of different forms, even more than the xenomorphs. There are some features that are common amongst all these different forms of Tyranids. First of which are they're all connected to a hive mind. This hive mind is a giant telepathic network where all Tyranids are linked together and work in unison. In the 40k universe, connections to the warp is a pretty important thing. This is how psychic users, called psychers, draw power. The warp is also how communication and warp travel work in the universe. Because Tyranids attack in large numbers and have a strong telepathic ability, it's massive interference, which can block psyker abilities or drive them insane. Meaning there's no way to communicate for backup and no way to warp travel away from the Tyranid attack. One important thing with their telepathic abilities is some Tyranids are what are called synapse creatures. Think of this like a Wi-Fi extender of the hive mind. These synapse creatures are more intelligent and allow the hive mind greater control over other nearby Tyranids. To oversimplify it, think of turning up the difficulty of a video game AI if there is a synapse creature nearby. Tyranids have a hard exoskeleton type structure. Depending on the variant, this can be relatively weak or it can be similar to tank armor. Tyranids are also immune to acid and immune to poison. Most are faster than humans, and most also have an increased amount of strength. They actually do have ranged weapons, which are all biological in nature. This can range from being the same material as their armor, making up weapons like claws, or it can be ranged weapons which can fire acid, poison, or even flesh-eating worms. Not something I would want to be hit by. We obviously won't talk about every Tyranid form like we didn't talk about every Xenomorph form, but I'll talk about the ones that I think are the most similar to the classic Xenomorph. Let's start with the Gaunts. Gaunts come in two forms, termagaunts and hermogaunts. Both of these are about 4 feet tall and roughly the size of a large dog. Termagaunts are range and hermogaunts are melee. The termagaunts will use guns that can either fire acid or flesh-eating insects to devour their target, while hermogaunts have scything talons, which are made up of similar material to their armor. This species of Tyranid is absolutely vicious. Gaunts are simply controlled by the hive mind and don't really have tactics on their own. If there's not a synapse creature nearby, they'll just instinctively attack anything they find, and they won't really plan out or use any kind of stealth. So without one of these links nearby, they're just mindless and hyper-aggressive. Their armor isn't anything special, and while their attacks are deadly, they're mostly based on numbers. A quote about them is, "A lone hermogaunt is a little more than target practice. 100, however, is a different beast entirely." The next Tyranid we'll look at is the warrior. Warriors stand almost 8 feet tall and are highly adaptable. They have a huge variety of weapons, from cannons to actual swords and whips made from biomass. One of the coolest guns they have is the venom cannon. This gun fires high-velocity shards of hardened poison that forms in crystals, so it impacts, shreds, and poisons the target. With these high-velocity shards, they'll actually use them to help destroy vehicles. Warriors are a close match to the Space Marines, which are basically superhumans. They have superhuman strength, reaction, and they have a variety of weapons. Because the warriors have 4 arms, they'll often have both a melee and a ranged weapon, so it can adapt to any situation. Finally, we'll look at the Hive Tyrant. These are massive Tyranids that have a strong hive mind connection. When one is nearby, they typically are the main synapse and will be controlling the small creatures. Like warriors, they have a variety of weapons and can even grow wings. It's said they're slower than an aircraft, but can still take down planes if they get close. They are roughly 20 feet tall and have the similar swords and cannons to the warriors, just bigger. Because they're linked so strongly to the hive mind, they're highly intelligent. Their intelligence is essentially immortal, because anything they learn is connected to the hive, and then if the hive tyrant is killed, that intelligence is simply reborn into another one. Hive tyrants have an insane strength and can tear through steel and similar material like it's nothing. They also have pretty impressive armor. Anything short of anti-armor rounds will likely just bounce off its shell. When a swarm of Tyranids show up on a planet, it's nothing short of apocalyptic. They blot out the sun with pure numbers. There is a huge array of different bioforms coming from a biological spacecraft, all being controlled by a single hyper-intelligent hive mind. The Tyranid horde will start eating biomass as it goes, create even more Tyranids, and while all this is happening, the connection to the outside world is cut off, and the powerful psychers can't even do anything. When Tyranids show up on a planet, it's basically a lost cause, and the only real hope is to blow up the planet, to hopefully slow them from getting to another one. Now let's get into the 1v1 battles. The first will be a Gaunt against a Xenomorph warrior. A Xenomorph is about 50% bigger than a Gaunt. Xenomorphs have an edge on intelligence when you compare them to a hermogaunt or termagaunt that isn't connected to the hive mind. Remember that Gaunts will just act on instinct if they're not connected to a synapse, while Xenomorphs will hunt and stalk its prey even without a queen nearby. They're both fast and likely have similar agility, so I don't think that would be a huge factor here in considering a winner. So for all of these Xenomorph against Tyranid battles, one thing that gets complicated is the weaponry and the acid. They both have acid that can eat through steel and several layers of metal, so the acid seems pretty comparable. And each species is resistant to their own acid. Even if you want to edge out one acid over the other, both species are at least acid resistant, meaning that it won't be as dramatic as using the weapons or acid in its normal materials. So even if you want to say the acid does something, it won't be that effective. Both Gaunts and Xenomorphs are able to rip through steel and armor, so their offense will be high enough to take each other out. If it's a termagaunt, I think the biological weapons they use won't be very effective and it's a Xenomorph. The acid might hurt it but won't kill it, and the biological flesh-eating weapons may just burn up once they hit the Xenomorph's acidic blood, if it can even make it through the exoskeleton, which is pretty questionable here. Because of this, I think a Xenomorph would 1v1 beat a termagaunt. A hermogaunt is a closer match, but the Xenomorph still has the edge on intelligence, stealth, and has size on its side. With fairly similar weapons and a longer range tail, the Xenomorph is likely to get the jump on a hermogaunt, which is disconnected from the hive mind. Gaunts are a horde species and just aren't meant to fight 1v1. Next up is the warrior against warrior matchup. This one is going to be a stomp for the Tyranids. The warriors are bigger than the Xenomorphs and stronger. They have a similar or higher intelligence than a Xenomorph, and the biggest factor here is going to be weaponry. The Xenomorph's tail and the inner jaw are strong, but they don't have a range advantage against the swords and long-distance weapons of the warriors. The Venom Cannon is an anti-tank style weapon that could absolutely blow a Xenomorph apart before it even got close. And the other melee weapons would be enough to kill the Xeno, or at least hold them off at range to blast them apart with one of the ranged weapons. The only way a Xenomorph warrior could kill the Tyranid warrior here is by using stealth and somehow getting an inner jaw attack on its head. But I really don't see that happening to a Tyranid warrior. The strength and weapons advantage are just too big for the Tyranids here, who are used to fighting superhuman space marines. The final 1v1 fight I want to talk about is the Queen versus a Hive Tyrant. This is similar to the last fight. The Hive Tyrant is too intelligent for a stealth kill, and the Queens normally aren't that stealthy anyways, and it has insane weaponry that can blow apart tanks. And the Queen and the Hive Tyrant are similar size, and if there is a strength advantage, it likely goes to the Hive Tyrant here. Like the other fights, the acid and the poisons won't really come into effect. Having a similar size, the weapons will largely edge this out in favor of the Hive Tyrant. Queens are formidable, but they're meant to produce aids and are not meant to be the frontline warriors like Hive Tyrants are. As far as army versus army, it's not really a contest. Xenomorphs are predators that will always find a way to breed and remove threats as they go along, while Tyranids are more like an army descending upon you. While Xenomorph Queens do have a telepathic link, they aren't army commanders and don't have the variety in tactics and weapons that the Xenomorphs do. These Xenomorphs would have no way to deal with the giant creatures that the Tyranids have, as well as their flying creatures. Plus, these Xenomorphs are planet-bound, while Tyranids can continue to bring more soldiers from their ships out in space. I'll add in some pictures here showing the crazy scale of some of the Tyranid options in the army level. I won't go into great detail here because the pictures should show just how big and monstrous some of these creatures are. While it is sci-fi, the people in the Alien movies are largely based on reality. They act normally, they're normal humans, and they have understandable weapons, and they're always in small survival groups. 40k is an insane universe filled with superhumans and armies that will conquer worlds with ease. In their own universe, each of these species is an alpha predator, but when you compare them, the Tyranids just come from a fission with higher power scaling. If you like this type of content, make sure to subscribe for more and like the video. Thank you for watching.